Welcome to Boomer Being. We're honored today at Andover Television and Boomer Being to host Congresswoman Niki Tsongas as our esteemed guest. Congresswoman Tsongas was elected to the United States House of Representatives in a 2007 special election, becoming the first woman in 25 years to serve in Congress from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She represents the Massachusetts 3rd District, which spans across portions of Essex, Middlesex, and Worcester counties. Congresswoman Tsongas is honored to serve on the House Armed Services Committee. As the only member from Massachusetts on this prestigious committee, and being recently named to a leadership position as the top Democrat on the Subcommittee for Oversight and Investigations, she has authored many important pieces of legislation. She also serves on the National Resources Committee, which formulates federal policy related to domestic energy production, national parks, and the environment. The 3rd District is home to 2 national historical parks, national heritage areas, and a network of rivers protected under the Wild and Scenic River designation. Tsongas had made accessibility to the people she represents the hallmark of her office and spends most days that Congress is not in session hosting events such as Congress on Your Corner and visiting with the residents and communities she serves. Born in the first year the baby boomers came into being, Congresswoman Tsongas has graciously accepted our invitation to share with us more about her work and her impressions of being part of this important demographic. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Yeah.
Wonderful to have you.
Thank you for inviting me.
As you know, this is a show all about baby boomers. How did growing up a boomer mold you? And how did it contribute to the successful person you've become today?
Well, I think being in the first year of the baby boomer generation, I was born soon after the conclusion of World War II. My father had survived the bombing of Pearl Harbor, went on to engineer runways across the South Pacific, and actually met my mother on a train towards the end of World War II. He had gone home. He was from South Dakota. He'd gone home, and my mother came from Chicago, and they were going to California, and they were seated together in the dining car of the train. And that's how they met. And I think, among many things, baby boomers are reflective of just the movements of people across this country, much of it brought about by World War II. But that certainly has become ever more of who we are as a people. But in truth, growing up, I didn't think of myself as a baby boomer. I was a product of a family. My father went on to serve in the Air Force. In that capacity, we lived all over the country and actually the world. I went to high school in Tokyo, Japan, where my father was stationed. And what I recall more than anything was the presidency of John F. Kennedy, who really, I think, symbolized to young Americans the possibilities of public service, and in particular, the importance of seeking elective office. So those are the things I think I was mostly shaped by, was those experiences of living in many different places, being exposed to different cultures, different parts of this country, in combination with the presidency of Mr. Kennedy, who I think did make it all seem so possible and so worth doing, to engage and be committed to a life of public service.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I feel fortunate for it.
Sure. So you mentioned your parents. What did they instill in you that's most notable in your character today?
Well, I think by example more than by dictate, just this notion that they were committed to serving our country. My father won by his service during the war, but also the fact that he then committed to many years of service in the Air Force. This was a commitment that my mother very much shared. I never heard a single word of complaint about the many moves that we had to make. It was always the possibility of a new place, the exposure to something different. So more than anything, that notion of service is very much rooted in the life I led with my parents. My mother had a deep commitment to education. I mean, she always challenged us to seek out and go to the best schools that we could as we went on to higher education, on to college. She just really felt it was invaluable. And that was reinforced by the example of my grandmother, who was a graduate of the class of 1903 at the University of California in Berkeley. She was one of a few women who'd gone to college, majored in math. So in that commitment to education and in that example of my grandmother and my mother, I never saw any limitations, and nor did I ever hear of any from my father as well. I was one of 4 daughters. That women could, anything was possible. No doors were shut. We weren't told that we should go be XYZ, but we were also never told we couldn't be XYZ. And so in that, I think those are really the pillars of it: the exposure, the commitment to education, and this feeling and this valued element that the world was very open to women's opportunity for women. And then I think too, given the history of these decades, those opportunities were actually opening almost every day and expanding, and I was able to take much advantage of all of that.
Wonderful. A very special upbringing, I think. Not everybody had the benefit of being told that there were no doors that can't be open for you.
It's true, and I look back on my high school experience. I went to it was a high school that was run by the Defense Department in Tokyo, Japan. There were a good number of high schools there because there was such a large military presence in post-war Japan. And again, seeking elective office, student council or whatever, we women were doing it to whatever degree any of our male counterparts were doing. So I just never felt it anywhere along the way. When I went on and decided to go to law school, soon after I graduated from college, I had married Paul. I'd moved to Lowell, Massachusetts. I went to college in Massachusetts as well, but I applied to go to law school at Boston University, and at the time, BU was one of the few law schools that was taking a significant number of women. At the time, it was about a quarter of the class. Again, I was in the right place at the right time. Saw an opportunity, had made a decision that I wanted to become a lawyer, and was able to do so. Many years, I didn't finish law school right away. I left for a period and then went back. And by the time I went back, Boston University was over 1/2 women, and almost every law school in the country had opened its doors to women. So much changed in the intervening years. But again, just being able to take advantage of opportunities and having the doors pretty wide open for those who wanted to walk through them.
Thank you. So tell us, what is your vision for your constituents? I know it's a very big, broad question, but what can you share with us?
Well, first and foremost, I think the being very open to my constituents, creating as many opportunities as I can personally, and my office can, to be available. So you referenced the Congress on your corner, which is something that I've done, I think, about 70 different versions of that, where we go into a community, let the community know I'm going to be there, give people an opportunity to come down and talk to me. It's on a one-on-one basis, so as a constituent comes, they can talk to me about an issue. If there's a particular matter that they need some help with the federal government, we can start that process. And in the course of it, I often learn as well. It's a two-way street. It's about me there to be as helpful as I can be, but also I need to hear from constituents what's on their minds, because I take that back with me to Washington. So first and foremost, I think, is being as open as possible. We have an office that's deeply committed to constituent services. So if you need some help with, if you're a veteran and you need some help with a VA, if you're a senior and you're having some issues with Social Security or Medicare, if you're seeking help on the immigration side of things, we're there to help. But also the Merrimack Valley is home to many communities that were rooted in the Industrial Revolution, really do take seriously and trying to find a way forward for communities that are trying to reinvigorate themselves. So very engaged with our communities around economic development, and always a resource to our companies. An example of that is New Balance. New Balance is a great company. It's in Lawrence. It's obviously a major source of employment for many people in the city of Lawrence, but also the surrounding area. And they can manufacture an American-made training shoe for the use of our newly recruited service members. And there is an amendment called the Berry Amendment, which says that first and foremost, those fighting in our behalf or entering the service in our behalf should be wearing American-made products. But an exception had been made for the training shoe. And New Balance came to us to say, you know, we can make an American-made training shoe. It isn't necessary that our recruits go buy shoes that were made in China or wherever. So working with the Defense Department, we introduced language in the defense bill to challenge the services, to change the rule, to make sure that our new recruits were wearing American-made shoes. And finally, we had some success. So New Balance can now compete to provide those shoes, as can other manufacturers that are focused on American-made manufacturing. There's a company in Michigan. So I felt the Berry Amendment was an important issue philosophically, but also obviously making manufacturing in this country is very, very important. We have companies that are committed to doing that. I feel those companies should have our support, and this was one way to acknowledge what New Balance does and create an opportunity for them to continue to make shoes and provide them for our new recruits.
Tremendous. Love stories like that.
Well, it's a great story, and I look forward to New Balance, you know, getting in there. It won't be nothing automatic about it. They'll have to compete for it, and the contract will have to be awarded. But they brought that issue to us, and it's an example of how I learn from our constituents, whether it's a company, whether it's an individual, whether it's an organization, whether it's a community. I am always learning. And then obviously to take the opportunities that one has as a member of Congress to make a difference on the policy level. So we were able to do that in terms of just, you know, creating opportunity for New Balance. But there are many issues that I find, despite the deep partisanship, where we're able to work together. I've worked with a congressman from Ohio, Congressman Mike Turner, who is a Republican, who actually is going to be visiting our district at my invitation a week from today. And he and I have worked closely on the issue of sexual assault in the military. And we've been able to enact, working across the aisle, some very important reforms. Still much work to do. I think we all know what an egregious crime it is, and it's altogether too prevalent within our active duty military. But again, at the policy level, there is much we can do if we're willing to work across the aisle. And again, learning from our constituents. It was people who came to us to tell us their stories of being assaulted while serving that opened my eyes to this issue, how important it was, and how much reform was needed. And we've been able to move ahead. More to do, as I said, but had some real success.
That's great. So your election in 2007, we mentioned, marked the first time a woman from Massachusetts was elected to serve in 25 years. Quite an accomplishment. What would you like your legacy to be in that regard?
Well, first of all, to encourage young women who have any interest in serving themselves to think of elective office and to understand that women can't win if women don't run, and to just take advantage of openings and put your foot forward and move ahead. I'm so grateful now that Senator Warren has been elected from the Commonwealth. Congresswoman Clark has been elected to the seat that Ed Markey held. So we are changing. We have really remarkable women candidates running for many statewide offices. So I think that is the future, that we should be as present in elective office as we are in the broader community, and we reflect about 50%, over 50% of the population of the Commonwealth. So we need women in elective office, and to understand that women's voices make a difference. So whether it's around sexual assault in the military, it's an area where women members of Congress who have really taken it to heart. I'm grateful to have Congressman Mike Turner's assistance, but in large part it is the women. As a member of armed services, I took an interest in body armor and learned that body armor, very protective. Our soldiers, on my many trips to Afghanistan, I've seen how our soldiers do wear it, and it is very helpful and keeps them from suffering terrible harm. But in a hearing, I asked, has the Defense Department ever developed female body armor? And the answer was no. Now, obviously, our body types are different. We need that body armor to be shaped somewhat differently in order to protect us and allow us to do the job we need to do. But despite the fact that women were 14% in the military, they had never considered developing body armor for women. So it's in these very modest ways as well as large ways that we bring attention to issues that might otherwise go unnoticed. But also we have a point of view on all the large issues we face. So whether it's our commitment to education, whether it's around our way forward on immigration reform, as we make decisions around our engagement around the globe, all of these things need to have the reflect the voices of all Americans, and women need to be part of those bigger discussions as well as the ones that are more unique to our particular districts.
That's really an incredible story that you've made many trips to Afghanistan. I mean, I think of you in your district or in Washington, but to think of you, you know, in harm's way, that's really a whole different ball of wax.
Well, on the Armed Services Committee, I felt it was very important to make a trip, and soon after being elected in 2008, I made my first trip to Afghanistan as well as Iraq. And every year have gone back to Afghanistan, have been to Iraq one more time. But again, to see, we in the past 4 years, we've gone over Mother's Day, and that's to thank our women soldiers who are serving, to sort of shed a tear with them as they're missing being home over Mother's Day. It's always a very, very touching time to be with them. But as we're over there, we also wanted to see what gains have been made for Afghan women as a result of our presence. It's a bipartisan trip. It's usually equal number of Democratic women members of Congress as well as Republican. And I think we all come away deeply impressed by the gains that women have achieved over there, whether it's, and they've taken advantage of opportunities. So whether it's education, healthcare, serving in parliament, whatever it may be, women have become very much a part of the life of that country. And I think our fear, my fear, as we leave, is that we not abandon those gains, that we need to be very insistent that our government do everything it can to protect those gains, create the continued space for Afghan women to take advantage and grow what they've achieved. And part of that is we've got to encourage the election going forward to the two differing candidates to resolve their differences and create a unity government, and that we enter into a bilateral security agreement that allows for a very modest presence there, one more of advising, but nevertheless is part of how we diplomatically focus on securing the gains for women in Afghanistan. So I feel it's part of my job. I have to say we're very well protected when we go over there. I never have real fear for anything. We're able to get around the country in ways that most members don't try to do, and it's because we want to see what we're doing militarily, but we also want to see what's really happening in the lives of Afghanis. And as a result, we're able to see a somewhat different Afghanistan than those who just go over with the focus on our military efforts.
Tremendous. What else are you hoping to pass along to future generations? I mean, this is one obvious way, but what else?
Well, I think, in my work on natural resources, this is one of the things I enjoy about this district, is it's a district that's defined by its rivers. So if you think of the Assabet and the Sudbury rivers, they sort of go into the southern part of the district. They come into Concord, Massachusetts to form the Concord River, and Concord is a part of the district. The Concord flows into the Merrimack River in Lowell, and then the Merrimack makes its way through the Merrimack Valley, and many of the communities of the district are along the Merrimack River, have the Merrimack running through it. And so I think how we protect our rivers is very important, whether it's through designating certain parts of those rivers as wild and scenic, so that we get federal resources coming to better protect them, or how we just invest more broadly in clean water and make sure that the water we have is usable and environmentally sound for the fish and wildlife that need to live in it. I think how we address climate change is a critical generational issue, and I'm sorry that we continue to have such a disagreement across the aisle as to the cause of climate change and what the route forward is. But I'm grateful that the Environmental Protection Agency has made some decisions and challenging us as to how we go about addressing climate change. I think it's not the best way forward, but We haven't been able to deal with this issue legislatively, and I think there's ample opportunity through regulation to deal with it. And Massachusetts has created a model, as Massachusetts has done in so many ways. So whether it's around our regional effort to control greenhouse gases, we also regionally created the model on healthcare reform, our commitment to education reform, just our marriage equality. In so many ways, Massachusetts has led the way, and it's doing so yet again in the area of climate change. But it's something that needs a national, if not international, solution. And I will continue to lend my voice to the challenge it presents and the need to address it.
Wonderful. So, what would you change if you could?
Well, in Washington, I think what I would change is I've found how positive it can be to serve when you can work across the aisle and find ways forward in a bipartisan way. The nature of our government is such that we have to do it that way. And if I could change anything, it would be to sort of change a culture today which tends to have such hard and fast lines. It makes it so difficult to work across the aisle, because I've seen what's possible both in terms of what I've been able to do working with other members, but also when push comes to shove, what we're able to do as a Congress when we're able to do that. So in every instance where we've finally resolved an issue, it's been bipartisan in nature. It's had Democratic votes and Republican votes. It's made its way to the Senate, where similarly it has bipartisan support, and then our president signs it. Absent that bipartisan solution, we are not able to affect change. And if I could change anything, we do it when push comes to shove. I do wish we didn't have to get so far, so boxed in before we're forced to the table to come up with a compromise. So we'll keep hoping for that. In the meantime, when I sought office many years ago, I did feel it was important for Massachusetts to elect a woman. But more than anything, I felt it was important to change the tone of politics in Washington, and I've tried to do that. Obviously can't do it across the board, but have tried to do it in my own way, and to bring the values I hold dear to the discussion and find ways to implement them.
Well, you're doing a wonderful job.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
It must be. So 2016 is an election year. I was wondering if anyone has filed to run against you and what your goals might be for your next term.
Well, until we get to the general election, I'm really focused on doing the job, that I was sent to do. And I do have an opponent, and we'll focus on that come September. But in the meantime, again, just focusing on doing the job, making sure I'm available and as transparent as possible in the work that I do. So again, whether it's Congress on your corner, or we do e-newsletters so people can read up on why I'm doing what I'm doing, or teletown halls where I can reach into a community and talk to people about whatever the issue of the day may be. I will continue to focus on making it in America and manufacturing in this country. That's who we are as a people. It's certainly who the Merrimack Valley is. The Industrial Revolution was born here. Our identity is wedded in manufacturing, and as we see with New Balance, we see it at Polar Tech, we see it in the clean energy side of things, where we're home to some of the more successful clean energy companies. We're home to many companies invested in the Defense Department and providing innovative products to protect our soldier and help our service members as they're engaged in conflict wherever it may be, to continue focus on job creation and education. Obviously key to being able to do those jobs. It takes a higher order of skills. We have to be educated to do them, and to continue to challenge the services to reform their culture so that those who seek to serve are never harmed by their own.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So we have a few minutes left in our show, and we've covered so much. I really appreciate this so much. Is there anything we haven't discussed about your work that you'd like to share with our Boomer audience?
Well, I think just to let your listeners know that we are here as a resource, to never hesitate to call my office if you think there's something we can be helpful with. it never hurts to ask, at the very least, because we might know of a way forward. And that's true if you're an individual. It's true if you're an organization that's looking for opportunities through the federal government and just not sure what they might be. It's also true of the communities, but we work closely with all the elected leadership of all the communities of the district. But to never hesitate, and obviously if it's not about a particular issue where there's some assistance we can be, to always let us know what your thinking is. Because again, I'm informed by what people think, and I may not always agree, but at the very least I will know how my constituents and the constituents of the 3rd District are feeling about particular issues, especially as we're living in very challenging times. And one issue after another emerges, and I just need to hear from people.
Yeah, well said. We do have Congresswoman's contact information, so stay tuned at the end. There'll be an email address and phone information if you'd like to do so.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been very, very enlightening, and we're honored to have you as our guest.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's great to be here.
Thanks for being with us on Boomer Being. See you next time.